Okay.
There's
So
already
sure
a question in the chat.
Okay, so Abdul and Cynthia, if you guys can let me know when questions come up, because when I'm sharing, it's really hard to see those. If you can let me know that, that'd be great. Thank you. Alrighty, so first off, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I understand that you have a whole slew of branding questions. I have a sandbox area that might answer some of those for you. So if you want to take a note at the of the URL at the top, sandbox-2022 for ArcaLearn. And then what I've done is I've set up some samples showing different sorts of tiles being used, different features, things like that, and applied a sort of fairly generic brand to it. And I've also created under the resources section content samples. So if you're adding custom content to your content pages, we can get into that a little bit more too. This would be a really great reference. It just shows you, if there's any custom HTML, you can just copy and paste what's in here and apply it. The typography one's pretty simple, but when you start getting into things like media, if you want to have, a little card or thumbnail like this, or if you're including videos and you want to make sure they're responsive so they still work on phones and tablets and the larger screens. If you know the dimensions, this one is for the 16:9, so the widescreen, and then also the smaller screen. And I think I grabbed these from different regional centers just to make sure that I had relevant examples. And then I also put in, sometimes you're creating a page to link to a bunch of other pages. So I created a sample of what you could do for that as well. So just to give you some ideas on some resources for this. The first question, let me start actually in the admin view. So the first question is, I need some help as to what section of the branding goes to what section is visible on the page. Okay, so when we're in the branding, there are quite a few options, and we're actually in the process of prepping a whole bunch of changes because these are settings that we had before we went responsive. We applied to responsive, and now we're about to do a library update for Bootstrap, which is one of the main libraries we use to apply the responsive layout. We're over the course of this year, we're doing a library update, which will change these settings and will make these settings a lot more obvious. And when we do that, we will be adding notes like this will appear on this sort of thing. And it'll be a lot more, honestly, it'll be a lot more like this, like here's a table, I want to change this color, I want to change the color, the background color of the alternating rows and things like that. So we'll be a much better described after that change. But until then, the primary, how the layout of the page approaches and the content layout are the two most commonly used branding pages. The page layout, it covers everything from the masthead and the design that's been applied for the masthead. So for this example, which I'm actually going to pull up, the masthead is the white block at the top, near the top of the page, which shows the logo, the language selection, the account drop down for details of this, your main menu as well. Okay, so the learner view background is the overall page background. Under masthead, we have which logo we want to use. Do we want to put a background image behind? Background images behind can be difficult for accessibility, so I would recommend skipping that if you possibly can. Then we're looking at setting the background color and border color. I typically 99.9% of the time make them the same color. I haven't run into a brand where I need to make those different actually in a very long time.
Are those colors hex codes?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they are. Yeah. And actually, if you Google hex codes and stuff in Google, you'll probably come up with some pages that can list that. I'll see if I can find a good resource for that and add that as well. Okay. And generally, if you want to make sure that it is the simplest, cleanest color, stick within the hex codes. If you need to go transparency, like a slight transparency on something, then that's when you need to apply some customization to it. Okay. Next, we get into the learner profile boxes. So right now, that would be this content with the language and the login dropdown up here at the top right. This is appearing embedded inside the masthead because it's technically, even though the background color is the same for this one, it's appearing as a tab area within the masthead. Okay, for maybe one or two of the domains where we have it as a login bar, in which case it would appear between this, the cookie banner, which I'm going to say okay and get rid of right now. So at the top of the page right here above the masthead. Okay, so those are the two options above the bar above, and the tab would be sort of up in the top right corner of the masthead area. You also have the options to show the user detail information as a dropdown or as links. Right now on this sample, I have it selected as a dropdown. If you go links, then it's text links. And I think there's icons with them as well to help illustrate what the content is for and the link is for. You can define the background that would be either the background of the tab or the bar, depending on what you have selected. And you also have the option to select a default profile photo. That means that if you are, when you get into it, when you're showing this logo, this image here, if you have not uploaded one, it'll show that default one. So if you have like like the tree maybe for Arca or some other piece of imagery that you want to use as a default, you can do that too. Okay. The main menu bar has a background color. You can also do a background image. Again, I'd highly recommend against that if you're focused on accessibility at all coming up, just from a simplicity perspective. Menu item colors as well. So you can say what the text color is, what the current menu. Okay, let me go into here. So the text color would be right now it's set to white. And then as you can see on resources, that is what the active section is that you're in, the active page that you're in. That will show as the other color. And then you have the option to change the background color behind it. I haven't selected that for this, but you can also change the background color behind this. Okay. Menu placement. You have a couple options now for menu placements. If you're trying to go with a very compressed masthead area, you can in fact put the, right now it's below, but you can now put it next to the logo. So it would appear right below that tabbed content for the language. Okay. Within the content area, that would be this block below. So from the page header to just below the, just before the footer, that would be the content area, in which case you can say what the background color of that and the area border color of that would be. So for, as you see, that put the overall background color is that really light color, but not white, and then white for the content area to help separate those. You can play around with those. You can make them the same color, but just be very cognizant of keeping the contrast very different whenever you have content on top of a background color. Okay. You have the option to show breadcrumbs, which is the listing of the pages of how they navigate back up to the home page. So if I were to turn that on, I would see right below the masthead area, I would see I'm on content samples. I would then see the next page up is resources, and then the next page up from that is home. So it just shows you the breadcrumb of how to get back to the home page. And then the last one is the page header, which I've activated on this domain, and that shows the page header with a block and a border and such. On this domain, I've put some branding on it that pulls from other colors within the branding options. So I'm dynamically pulling those in using the custom branding, but typically it just shows as a transparent background color with a line below it. Okay. And the content layout is the other most commonly used one, and that's where we define which font sets we want to use and the layout of the colors of the buttons and things like that. So we start off with which font do we want to use for the body text, and then which font do we want to use for the header text. So this would be the header font, and then this right here would be the text font. can't locate where the color of the brown and white areas are. The masthead is set to shades of blue. Some of the domains may have some custom branding that's overridden. If we were trying when we originally applied it to match your center's branding. And I think there may be some that have background images as well. So I'd probably have to see which specific domains to take a look at that. But I think we're going to do a sort of really good Q&A part of that right after this, where you can ask me specific questions about your specific domains. Okay. Then we have the link color. So any link text, headings. Obviously, if you have a heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. If you're not sure about any of those I've illustrated those in the content sample. So H1, H2, H3, H4 isn't really there, but I've included that as well. Okay. Then any button styling, this will be anywhere the button appears everywhere in the learner view would have the same styling. There are a couple of exceptions only in that some of them are already on that color. So we've swapped out the background color of the button so that you can see it on top of whatever that color might be behind it. So there's just a couple of nuances to that, but anything within the content area, you'll see that we follow those styles. Okay. You may not be able to see on the screen, but we always have a slightly different color or a very different color just from adding the visual cue of when you have a button, you want to be able to mouse over and see that that's done something. So for that reason, we always try to go with at least a slightly different color. Okay.
So Bill, can you go back to the headings and explain what would be a heading 1 and what would be a heading 2 and what would be a heading 3?
Sure. So a heading 1 is always the page title of the page. So so this is a heading 1. A heading 2 is, and unfortunately, you will get into this a lot more when you get into the accessibility work. Whenever you're breaking up content on the page, you need to have always start with look at the content from a hierarchical perspective. So your top most important heading, just like you do in Word, would be the heading 1. Okay. And then the next important thing, like if you're going to subset the content beneath that, that would be a heading 2 or a heading 3. So it really dictates the nature of the content or the grouping of what you're about to talk about when you're looking at headings. So from a contextual perspective, it's a bit more like that.
Demonstrate that by going to are there courses in here or learners, or can you show us on a page? Because this resources page is a little confusing too.
It would be, I don't have an example of it actually. It would be.
Just use one of our pages. If you could just go to one of our regional center pages.
Oh, to the regional center pages?
Just go to the regular sandbox. Because it's set up.
Mm-hmm.
And on the learner view, just show us where what would be considered a heading 1, heading 2. I've always been confused about this. Sorry, I'm asking my question first.
It's very similar to, I'm not sure how much you use styles in Word at all, but it would be following the same sort of structure. Just trying to get into the sandbox for a sec.
I mean, is this useful to anyone else but me? I'm hoping. Well, one person.
I'm having trouble finding a page that really illustrates it.
Well, if you can't, that's
yeah, I can't find a sample. I will add a sample of it though into the resources section to show that. I think probably given some of the questions that we've already had, I think I should probably incorporate a little bit more information about accessibility as well, because For us on the page, we're going to look at this and say, well, that is the most important heading on the page because that describes what the page is. So that's an H1. And then we're going to look at this and see that it's the next important thing on the page, and that defines this group of content, and it's therefore the second heading. And the same for this because it is at the same level, but describes a different group of content. And then if I were to have text inside that and it was grouped, then I would have the heading for each of those be an H3. So you start off with the first most important, then the second most important, then the third most important, and try to make sure that you view them from a contextually hierarchical perspective.
Thank
I don't
you.
know how better to describe that, sorry. This is why I'm not a trainer. Okay. So from that, we move on to tabs, and you'll see tabs on various pages, like a transcript page per se is a pretty good example of that, or sometimes other content pages you might add. So for that, we always try to say that the first one that is emphasize the tab that you're actually in. We always put the color on that. And then the text color. And then what I try to do is make the other tabs less obvious because, to distinguish the difference in them, in which case I usually go with the same background color that I have on the content area, and then keep the text as a black color. Okay. And then forms, this would be, for example, like your login page, or if someone is purchasing, there may be some forms in the shopping cart, in which case the groups of the fields that you're filling in, so first name, last name, account information, things like that, are usually grouped in what we call a field set. And that field set has a legend, and that legend is sort of like the title of this group of fields that we're asking to fill in, like payment information versus account information. Okay. And that title typically has a different color and a different background. And then the rest of the, to border out that content, you can put a border around it. Okay. So that's how we use that. Okay. You can see that in pages like the shopping cart page, the My Profile page, to some extent, My Credentials page, and a little bit on the login page as well. Okay. And then tables. You probably have more row styling and colors than we actually use in the Learner View right now, but just in case someone wants to use that in some of their other pages, you can have header rows. So let me go back to that example one. So you have your header row, and then you could have subgroupings of your tables below. Honestly, 99% of the time, this is what your table structure will be. Your header row with a certain background color, your alternating content rows, just to make it easier to read the content from left to right and not remember and not lose which row you're on, and then a footer row. So I've included the text for the HTML for that, so you can copy and paste that and then change the number of columns and such. But when you're looking at HTML for a table, it's you look at columns, and those columns are called uselessly in HTML, it's called a cell. Okay, so you have a row, and then within that row you have cells. Okay. And then after that, probably the next most common one you look at is the login page. And this is just looking at the content and the background image you would have on the login page. So you can have a logo. You only need that if it's a different logo or a different format that you want to have than the masthead. The masthead will automatically be on the logo on that page now, so you don't need to include it. But you may have an image that you want to put on. So if you have an image of a happy person next to your login information or something like that, you can put that in there too. And then we also have the background image. So I grabbed this image. It's set to, I always set it to fit to page. And what that does is, I'm going to quickly log out so you can see this. That takes whatever the image is and it stretches it while maintaining its aspect ratio to fit the full size of the page. Okay, so if you have a nice photo of your regional center, you can use that, or if you want to use people, you can use that too. Just be cognizant of where the login box will appear. The other thing you have on the page is obviously your welcome content. and ideally the seal as well for GoDaddy. What I've done in the sandbox sample is that I've included this text. So if you, unless you're going to change this content here, maybe we can come up with some standard content, it's automatically going to pull the name of the domain. Okay. And then another feature, I'm not sure if you guys saw this before, is the page layout. So a full width takes up a lot more space on the page, whereas a narrow one is what I've got here, and it's a little bit more mobile friendly, I would say. This one. And the last one is whether or not you want to show the footer on the page. I usually don't bother on the login, but I do on the other pages. Okay. There are quite a few other options that have changed in the last little while. Do you want me to go through those, do you think, Maureen, all of these other ones?
Yes, if it's
Okay.
changed, yeah.
Sure. Okay. So in the learning activities layout page, we actually have a new layout option that we've provided for learning paths, and I highly recommend switching to this learning path layout. It is very optimized. It has support of activity groups inside activity groups. It doesn't force the page to load more than it needs to at any one time. So it's from an optimization perspective, it should load quickly and should respond quickly when people are going in and out of courses. I have a couple of examples of that to show you. Oops, that's probably a good one here. So this would be a learning path found, 20% complete. I actually made that say 20% complete for this demo, just so you could see a progress. I didn't have one that I had progressed in yet. And I am showing it as a donut chart instead of a progress bar. I prefer the donut chart over the progress bar from a visual perspective. And then you can select different things to show. If you have a due date set on the learning path, the due date will appear here, otherwise it will not. A few things like that. And then once you get into the core changes for this, you'll see that we have the course index, which is listing off each of the different activity groups within the learning path. If you only have one, this won't appear. And if you also have more than one, you'll be able to click through all the different activity groups. Okay, and each activity, regardless of type, will appear as a box instead of a row as it might have been before. And in that box, you'll be able to enter the activity or be able to view details on the activity, which will tell you the same sort of information you may have seen on other pages before. Depending on what's included, you'll see things like your marquee, your sessions if it's an ILT, if it's an attestation, portfolio, demonstration, any one of those sorts of activities. You'll also see the instructions on what to do to complete that activity. And if there are resources, you can view all of that as well. So it contains everything that you need to into that details modal, but still gives you the chance to enter e-learning courses. The percentage complete that appears here is automatically updated, as is the status of the activity and these notes down here as you enter and progress through the courses. Okay, so I do highly recommend taking a look at that. If you set it here, it becomes sort of the default for the domain, but you do have the ability to create or take a sample one that you have already, clone it, enroll in it. You can change those settings on a per activity basis. So I'm going to quickly cheat here. I'm going to go into
Isobel, is that
Yep.
setting available to everyone on their domains now?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes, it is. And if you wanted to change it on a single activity basis, you can go under Experience, Display Options. It's just collating what those options are for this learning path. There we go. And the same sorts of options appear for the learning path activity layout, where you can say that you want to go with an app container and you can say the progress bar. Okay. Other than that, the showing the learning path activities in detailed or simplified, that was the same as what was there before. I highly recommend staying detailed. and selecting the number of courses per row that appear on the catalog. Right now it says 1. I've actually tweaked it for this demo for this sandbox to show 2 across. I think that's my preference is 2 across when you're, especially when you're using any kind of filters on those catalog pages. Let me quickly pull that up for you to show you what I mean. So I have I've included the search box, I've included some filters, and therefore now I'm showing 2 across. Okay. Fast starting, always select that whenever you possibly can. And what that does is it doesn't make a learner confirm that that's what they want to do before they self-enroll in something but they're not purchasing. It just automatically triggers the process for enrollment.
Isabel, on
Yep.
that, I always recommend they not check that, because what it does is instead of an enroll button, it puts the start button there. And a lot of times we have people that enroll in stuff that's, you know, they don't want to take it right now. They want to take it later, and it starts the course. It automatically enrolls them, but it starts the course right away. And
Okay. It's up to you guys. It's up to you guys. From a user experience perspective, I always try to reduce the number of clicks. So for me, I by default always turn it on. But if you guys are finding that your users don't prefer that, then I'd follow what Maureen says.
right, I just, you know, if I were going online and I wanted to take a course and I found it and I wanted to start it right now, that would be great. However, a lot of our people, we say, okay, we want you to take these 3 courses, go in and enroll in them. And they're not going to take them right now. They just want to get the enrollment done. So when they're ready to take them, they can find them under my courses and start them.
Okay. Sounds good. The next couple, we used to separate out the catalog by tabs. We're not doing that anymore. So actually this option right here is coming out and will always be merged together in one list. Okay, so if you don't have that selected, don't worry about it. It's going to disappear in all the new catalog pages. We've merged them and provided a filter instead by type. The activity content layout, I much prefer from a user experience perspective rows as they were before. Actually, I have that example. So this is an example of rows where we have row 1 is the overview information, and row 2 is the progress. In the really old layout, we had the overview information on the left-hand side, and then taking about a quarter or a third of the page, and then the right-hand module showing the progress and resources and such. So I much prefer this. I think it's a lot cleaner. We have had some clients request that we change this to tabs so that it shows the activities, and then a separate tab shows the overview. If you guys like, we can apply that change too. But right now I've set it so that it has the overview information with the key information about when it's due appearing at the top of the page, and then the activities and such, or the details about the activity below. Okay. Next is how we want to show the progress. So typically there is either a progress bar or a donut chart. I prefer the donut chart from a visual perspective. It just makes it really obvious where you're at within the course or the learning path. You can have the option to break it down. Some of the feedback, even though one of our customers asked us to add this, the feedback that we saw from clients was that some of the learners didn't understand why there was this separation of the progress. So I would say if you've got learners that have a hard time understanding options like that, I would not select it. I think it's pretty clear if you just go with the base option, showing how much they've actually completed. I think this makes a little bit more sense, and it's a lot simpler. And then the next is if you're going to select a donut chart, which type of activities do you want to show it on? I have selected only learning paths, but some people like to include other activities as well. The reason that I only select learning paths is because as soon as you have multiple activities contributing to the progress and the percentage complete, that's great. If you have an e-learning course, chances are your e-learning course is not going to send us the percentage complete. They're just going to say the status of whether it's been started, not started, or in fact completed, in which case the percentage completes are only ever going to be 0%, 50%, or 100% because we don't know any better. So as soon as you started, we just put you at 50% until you've completed, in which case we put you to 100%. So if your courses don't send that level of information, which most courses don't, because most authoring tools don't provide that and don't send that detail, then that I wouldn't punch up the percentage complete. And then the next one, the next action is presenting the learner statement. So this means that in the overview box up in here, we can put messages to the learners to help encourage them to complete. So it would be show the following message to learner when they have not started. I've seen this used quite well in one of our clients where they said, time to get started, and then they put some message in. And then each one of these being a smart tag that would be replaced with information about the learner. Okay. Some people are applying credits to the activities. So they like to say, you know, once you've completed these credits can be awarded. Useful information about that. Started but not completed. And completed, like congratulations, you finished, kind of thing. Or if you haven't completed, it's great to see you coming back. Messages like that. If the activity is an ILT, then I recommend turning on the include to download the calendar file so that they can download that and put that in their calendar. But it's not necessary if you are presenting that information on a My Agenda page. Okay.
If you download it to calendar and you have an integration into let's say Zoom or Teams, then they aren't entering through the LMS, and Zoom isn't able to communicate that you've entered the meeting and take attendance.
Yeah, you would need to, if you're using it for webinars, you would definitely need to present the URL as something that was for the LMS specifically, as opposed to coming back through Zoom. So we can talk about that, but we do have some limitations. If we don't have single sign-on, then we have limitations with those webinar providers.
Right, and if you are using Isobel, are we still not able to block that text that goes in the email? Because some people download it to calendar, and then the admin has to go in and manually complete those people if it's set to learner, mark attendance by learner.
I cannot remember if they removed that from the non-edited text and put it in. I know that there was a few items on the roadmap about removing all of the non-editable text and putting it in the smart tags instead to give you more flexibility. But I haven't seen where that left off, to be honest. I don't know where in the roadmap that's coming up, but it's in somewhere in this year.
Great, thank you.
One thing that I'm using is the attendance code that really worked well for my community. Just an FYI.
I love the attendance code. And actually, if you are going to start using attendance codes, there's a tile called codes tile or something like that, that checks your attendance code, validates what activity it's for, and then gives them the option to say, yep, that's the right one. I mark that as attendance. You don't have to go find the activity. You can just go straight to your homepage and enter that. So I'm just going to make a note, and I will add that to the sandbox so you can see an example of that.
That alleviates more anyone from taking attendance. That's the issue I started running into because we had a lot of turnover at our agency. So it's constantly training people. So I just enabled attendance though, and we rolled it out last month and it worked really well.
Somebody wants to know, we'll go over attendance code. Abdul, if he's back, let's go over that.
I think he's muted, but I'm pretty sure he's
Stepped
gonna,
away, yeah.
we'll make sure he covers that. Yeah. Okay. And then the list groupings, this is actually not needed anymore. We made some changes to the transcript page, which is where this is primarily appearing in some old catalog pages. And we recently removed the requirement for that from the transcript page. And now transcripts have different options to filter by type, outcome, all of these things, so that you don't need to group them anymore. If you have multiple domains, you can also view by that information too. That's included in the output. And then when we're looking at metadata fields, we have requirements to include certain metadata fields in certain pages. List pages being any list page for a course. So any list or catalog page, custom page where you're listing activities, you have the option to include certain metadata fields, or when you're looking at the info page. We break them down by type. Right now, this may change over the course of the year. I know there's some roadmap changes for how we manage these settings, but they're broken down by type because different custom fields may be relevant to different types of activities. Okay. And then the last, I highly recommend playing around with these. If the course code only means something to you, hide it to the learner. And I would say that for pretty much everything. If there's information that's being output that doesn't matter to the learner, get rid of it. If they don't need to know what the course code is or who the publisher was, which is the domain where it's coming from, the enrollment date, things like that. If there's something that they don't care and they will never care, then I would recommend hiding it. The only two we haven't said is the start date, end date. If they're open, I'm only hiding them if they're open. And that's generally a rule I do as well.
Can you put in the roadmap to add to that list, go back up to that list, to hide the catalog tags, because I don't think the learners care how we've tagged these things.
Oh, anything that's a custom field, you can manage through the custom fields area. So if we're looking at that,
Okay.
I think we should look at the custom field options, because there are different ways to do that. Yeah, like you can include your, I have that. You can include this perhaps as a filter, right? So you can say, just show me the management things and things like that. But you may not necessarily want to actually show it here.
No.
We can definitely do that.
I think even the user type, we don't need. What we do need though, and I've already logged a ticket, we need the estimated time, because they could get it when they click on more info, but when they're just browsing through these pages like here, it would be nice to say, oh, this is a 10-minute video versus the one, below it is a 20-minute video, and they're very similar. I think I'll take this one.
Okay. I'll have to add that to the suggestions. We got a pretty full roadmap, so I'm not sure where we could squeeze that in, but I'll take that one back to the team. Okay. Then we have, what else do we have here? Oh, credits. I'm not sure if you guys are using credit systems at all for specific accrediting that someone has completed something and having that mean something either just within the LMS or beyond the LMS. But if you are looking to do that or use credits as a method as a tool within gamification, I would probably recommend having a separate session on how to use them for gamification and how to set up that credit system. If you are using it, then I would show it. If you're not, don't show it. Okay.
And we are using it, and I'll say this for the people that are on here because they're provider domain admins. That's where we list the credits, the CEU credits that they're getting. And that credit value will be what appears on their certificate as well. So Abdul, put that on the list of things to go over to credits. But yes, we should show it in the provider domains for sure.
And are these credits that are from a different regulatory agency, or are these credits that mean something to ARCA, and ARCA
No,
is the
they're
one confirming them?
another agency, and the regional center cares about it too, but providers are required to get so many continuing education credits per year, and they get certificates when they attend our training, and
Okay.
that's how they
That,
accumulate credits so that the regulatory agency can renew their license or whatever.
okay. Which, out of curiosity, which is the agency that you're working with for that?
Community care licensing. And I know I had a conversation with Doug or Cynthia about, and maybe Abdul, about integrating it so that they just get a report of everybody.
Yep.
But that's beyond this summit. So
Yeah, definitely.
But
So
working on it.
yeah, we should definitely talk about how credits are displayed, presented, and such, up to
And
the point
reported.
of reporting. Yeah, because you can set, when you get there, Abdul, make sure to cover, I would say, the credit statements then, as opposed to certificates. Because if you're using credits, then you need, some of the different crediting agencies have different requirements for what their credit statements look like when you're going to report. So we can look at that too.
Well, our certificates are, those statements are already on our certificates. So, but going forward, if we start reporting this out, we're going to definitely need those credit statements.
Yeah.
So that's beyond this, Abdul. Today we're not there yet. We've got it covered.
Okay. And then the last one is when you're opening a course and you're waiting for it to load, you can have a custom spinner. There's a default one that appears all the time, but if you have a custom one that that you want to use, like a little animated GIF or something, then you can upload that there. And then thinking some of the transcript options, don't think anything in there has really changed. The transcript page has changed, but I don't think the options here has really changed. It just, you can select which type of activities you want to include, the statuses you want to include. If you want to include external training, that also appears as a separate tab. If you want to include a PDF for the transcript, I don't recommend that, because the PDF, as soon as you click that button, it has to regenerate the PDF every time. And if you've generated a PDF, it can take a little bit of time. And I find that the patience for people when they're generating a PDF through a website is a lot shorter than if you're generating a PDF from, say, a Word document. And then credits, you can either show the credits that have been awarded, as well as the credit categories. There are different places that this applies, and we're starting to move that out of branding and more contextually to where that would apply. And I think that you'll probably find a lot of these things are starting to come out, but on the transcript page, definitely, if you need to be able to filter and show options for custom fields, then yes, you want to turn some of these ones on. So if you want to show that, that it had a specific unit as important enough information to show in a transcript, you can include that. And then also user metadata information. So if there's an employee ID or a membership ID, something like that, that you want to include, you can turn that on, and then on the transcript, it appears below the name. Whatever custom fields, like address, things like that, will appear below here. Okay. Course templates really only apply when you're looking at coloring your different assessments at this point. So that would include your colors, your navigation within it. But primarily it's mostly just going to be these guys right here. Just skip straight down to assessment options. And then that's where you dictate what you want your assessment colors to be if you're using an assessment that you're building within the LMS. Okay. And I think everyone here has experienced the advanced in one way or another. Alerts. So we have the standard cookie banner that warns people that we're using cookies and to look and find out more information about those cookies. The other is you have the option to include an alert banner, and this would be things like we're updating our new products and this thing is coming out, or we're updating the branding, or we're taking this domain offline, or we're adding a new domain, whatever the message is that you want to alert everyone in the domain to, or anyone in the domain and any subdomains from, then that's where you put that. And you also have the option of adding a subdomain one as well if you also already have a parent domain. So you can play around with those, but it's a great way to add an alert banner that appears above everything on the page. Navigation looks at what is appearing in this drop down here. So my profile, my transcripts is what I have selected. Transcript, my profile. You can also select, if you're selling courses, you can select to show the my purchases option. And then if you're starting to get into credits, you can also show my credentials. I would probably hold off on that until you really start looking at reporting. But once you start looking at reporting, then there's certain information about the regulatory agency that needs to be entered by users, in which case you really want to show this page. And then my codes, if you have people who are buying courses or activities and they're buying them in bulk to share. So say I was to buy a copy of a course for everyone in my office, then I would make that purchase. I would be presented with a series of codes, sort of like a coupon code, and that would enroll whoever I gave that to into the course. So say I gave that to Cynthia and Abdul, they would enroll into the course that I'd bought. And I would go to this My Codes page and I would be able to see all the information about how they progressed through those courses, which ones who actually started them, and which codes hadn't been used yet. Okay.
Isobel, we have some people that are going to be integrating PayPal or another payment processor, and utilizing the purchase option. This is another video we need, Abdul, on how, if you purchase codes for others, how that works. So just to ask Abdul to, I know you can't cover it today, but that's something that a couple of people may be interested in doing.
Okay. And then the next section is the supervisor settings. So we have a supervisor page. Let me just quickly flip to that right now. And this is called My Learners. I think we had an old page called My Learners, so I think that's why a number of you have named it My Learners, but the default name of that page is Supervisor View. It is I find it a much better approach to giving people access to any users that they are a supervisor of. So if I were to come in, I would see Cynthia, as I have an example here, and Abdul and Leah and all the people that I perhaps supervise. So I'd see the list of my learners, but I can also go to a list of, Cynthia's not enrolled in anything. If she was enrolled in stuff, she would be able to see the list of all of the activities that any of my learners are enrolled into. So I'd be able to come at this approach on, I just want to see how everyone's doing on that compliance course. I'd be able to come here and see that. If there are assignments that need to be marked, then I would be able to go to view all assignments and see any assignments that are requiring me to look at. Okay.
What happened to the transcript? Is it just below, or?
The learner transcript, I'd be able to access it from the learner perspective. Yeah.
What happened to the enroll button too?
I haven't selected anyone yet. And I apparently may not have permission to do that. Yeah. So there are a few options with this page, but it allows you to bulk enroll people into like all of your employees into something that may be available for self-enrollment sort of thing.
What does the Chime Me is in the chat? What does the Chime Me option do?
Chime is an Amazon product, and they asked us to add an option to send a Chime message, which goes through this this Amazon communication tool. And so Chime Me just means send me a message. That's all. But you'd have to be on Chime. It would work for anyone who's using Chime, but so far the only people using Chime that I've met are from Amazon. But I know we're being recorded.
Yeah,
it's not my favorite app.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
Are
We'll
there
edit
other
that part out
apps
of the
that
recording.
do that? Teams?
Well, it would be more like sending an email message, right? Would probably be the next thing that that would be the most useful, is just opening up an email to that user.
Right.
But it's really like if you're looking at using another tool, it would have to be something that everyone is using, as opposed to something that like I know that all of Amazon uses Chime, and it's mandated that they all have to use Chime. Therefore, for them, it made sense. But typically, the only thing that everyone uses is email, and even then, it's hard to confirm that. Though I think we'll
Different
probably be
providers.
looking at that a little bit more in the future about different methods for learners and supervisors, or learners even potentially from other learners, be able to communicate with each other.
Thanks. I think there's something else. Nope. Nothing else in the chat. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. And then also some supervisors, and this is currently here, but this may be switching out actually into some supervisor options, is the ability to allow a supervisor to reset someone's password. So if you're trying to offload some of the jobs for the admins onto people's supervisors, you can give them the permission to do that too. So so if, say, Cynthia forgot her password, she could come to me and I could reset it without having to go to an ARCA admin to do that. Okay. And then when you're working with an LMS that has multiple domains, like you guys do with your different regional centers, you may want to be able to distinguish which source of information you want to show. So if you have someone who's, say, a member like Maureen of probably more than one of these domains, the context of the domain that you're in may be what you want to define the context of the content that you appear in your supervisor page. So when you're looking at this page, Cynthia just got in this domain. She hasn't been enrolled in anything. And really, I'm looking at what has she been enrolled into, right? But you can look at this information from the context of any activities within this domain tree, like looking at this domain and looking up and down the tree of this domain for the domains that she's a member of, or you can say any domain within the LMS.
We probably
Okay.
don't have that type of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say maybe for Maureen's sake, you may want to select the current domain, just because if that's where the activities are that you're looking at from the context of, say, the sandbox, then that would make the most sense. And it also means that you're not looking at thousands and thousands of courses across all of the different domains.
Yeah, please don't pick that.
Yeah. Okay. And then again, there may be some more information you want to show on the users about different custom fields. I find that they typically just like to look at information on the learner separately, but that is an option as well. Okay. Forum settings. Pull this one up.
How many people are using forums? I know we are for SDP, but other than that. Anybody using forums?
So if you are using forums, and again, if you're a member of other domains, I would follow the same thing, just default it to the current domain. That way, anything that contextually makes sense to that domain remains in that domain. Otherwise, it will pull back all of the forums across all of the domains of which you're a member, of which you have access to. So, so generally, I try to limit it to the smallest subset that contextually makes sense to that domain. Okay, so it's very similar. We try to keep the same approach across everything. Like just try to source the content that you want to appear on that page to limit it to be relevant for the context of the domain. Okay. And then the last one is a new option that we've been working on for accessibility preferences. And I know we probably have a whole bunch of questions about accessibility coming up. The easy answer is it is not easy. to support accessible options with supporting your current brand. So what I found is if you have a learner view like this, you're going to be looking at making sure that you're going to look at things like the labeling, how it looks and works from a screen reader perspective, but you also have to deal with contrast and issues like that. So what we've started working on is an accessible view that removes all the contrast issues, removes really a lot of the coloring, and goes with a set color and a set structure of what you want to show. Now, if you want to have more control over that, then there's a lot of testing that needs to be done to make sure that your color palette meets the mandatory contrast requirements. And sometimes you may have to make a decision that differs from what the accessible standard guidelines are telling you need to do. And I say that because if you have, it's a really good example. You're a really, really good example. When you're looking at a page that has a lot of text on it, okay? If you have a large enough audience that's dyslexic, you probably want to highlight content on that page. Those highlights may not pass and probably will not pass accessible options, but you're making it more accessible for people who have dyslexia. So if you're looking at things like that, just remember that if you want to make it work for this audience, it may collide with making it work with another audience. And in which case, when you get to those points, sometimes decisions need to be made. But the key areas are you need to make sure that your content is above a certain font size, that the contrast between the text and any colors that are used for the text color and what's behind that text color are different enough. So there are certain contrast ratios that you need to meet. And make sure that the thing that we're talking about with the headings, make sure that you start with an H1, the next one down is an H2, and next one down is an H3, and so on and so forth. So some different labeling and hierarchical structure of things. We have created the sandbox, and what we could do is an accessible review on the sandbox branding. And if everyone's comfortable with that, I can have them go off and prepare this whole thing to make sure that it's fully accessible. And then when we're ready to work through each of the domains and have conversation about moving them into each of the domains, then the only thing that we would need to do when inheriting from this brand would be to make sure that the colors that we're changing it to also meet those contrast requirements. Are there any specific questions about accessibility that I can answer at the moment, since we're talking about it?
Yes. So screen readers.
Yes.
That's one thing.
You definitely have to test with screen readers manually. So you'll have applications like Wave. And I can include, I'll add a resource page for this. There are a couple primarily used screen readers, Wave, and I can't forget off the top of my head what the other one is. But even though there is some automated accessibility testing, everyone will tell you need to do a manual test as well within one of those screen readers. So if you are working on accessibility at the moment, I highly recommend downloading one of those. Keep it turned off until you're actually about to do the testing, and then turn it on, because it will try to screen read everything you're doing on your computer and not just that website. So keep it off until you're ready to start testing this, and then turn it off immediately after. And I can also include other tools for the automated testing, like Lighthouse is a good one for that. And also there are tools like this one with Wave. It'll tell you things, give you the contrast errors and things like that. So based on your brand's color palette, you may have to make some decisions about maybe lightening a color or darkening a color, or using a different color frame or branding for things like that. But this will give you an automatic report. Yep.
When you are getting ready to switch over and convert the domains, that's not going to happen overnight. You'll start with some domains that, are ready to move to the new format. You're going to be doing that part for them.
Yeah, I'll check the contrast. So yeah, what I'm proposing, and this is sort of the next part of the conversation, I think, what I'm proposing is we come up with a base brand that works for everyone, that incorporates any possible thing that someone wants to do. So if we take this sandbox and we add in, things that people want, like the code tile for the homepage and such, incorporate all of those things into it, then we can run an accessibility test to make sure that it works on the screen readers, test the base contrast colors and such, and font sizes and all of those labeling things that you need to test. And then after, when we're about to move them into each regional center's domain, we'd probably set up a sandbox, inherit it, do update the colors, and then do a contrast test then, so that we have some flexibility to discuss, this one's flagged because it's using this as your primary color. We need to use something other than that color because it doesn't meet contrast requirements. That's usually the one that comes up the most.
When you're talking about a template, you're talking about
Mhm.
the things that are below. Go to the home page, if you could here.
Mhm.
You're talking about whether they have a news feed or whether they have, this setup here.
Yeah.
You're going to include everything, which they can go in and say, well, you know what, I don't want my profile there.
Yeah,
They can turn
exactly.
it off, but you're going to make it available so that they have all these options. And then you're going to go in and look at their colors, their logo, and make sure that they meet the requirements. And then
Exactly.
each domain will have a decision to make about, if they don't meet the requirements for screen readers, that they lighten or darken or whatever. Correct?
Exactly. So I would say if we make sure that the sandbox has every possible component in that people are using, then we can make sure that the styling of it is appropriate, and then we can run the accessibility testing on it to make sure that that meets it. Then the only thing that really would be changing from domain to domain would really be the logo and the colors, in which case the only thing we really need to test at that point would be making sure that the colors meet the contrast requirements, because that's really the only thing that you worry about with the colors. So it reduces the workload for accessibility testing at that point.
We also had questions that came up in our meeting and other conversations I've had with people about closed captioning. Does the LMS support that? And yes, it does. However, there are, if your course is not published with that option, then, the LMS can't really help you. If you have a course, you've got to enable the closed captioning option button so that it could be turned on and off by the user when they're in the course.
It really depends on the course type and the media type. So I know that there's closed captioning options for certain media files that you can upload the closed captioning file for. I can't remember. Oh, Abdul, you probably remember this more than me because Leah was the one that spearheaded this, and you've probably been looking at it from a training perspective. But there are some options if you're uploading a video to the LMS for closed captioning. I haven't worked on that. That would be something that that Leah and Abdul know a little bit more about. So I'd have to get that information.
Right, but that's
But it might be something that Abdul can touch on. Yeah.
What I'm talking about is an e-learning course. So we've got 400 courses in there, and nobody has enabled the closed captioning on those courses. If we say, well, the LMS is now able to do closed captioning, that's not going to impact those courses that aren't already, e-learning courses that have audio. We're not going to be able to impact those, correct?
Correct. But you do have the option later on to come back and provide accessibility options, really alternatives to that content. So you can say, present a transcript, which is really just the content from the activity. You could present that as an alternative to it. If you select that, I highly recommend presenting that option only to screen readers, ideally, not to everyone. And then in which case you're just copying and pasting the content from the course into here. And then when you come to the course, let me see if I can grab one from the, oh, maybe from my courses area. Please tell me I'm enrolled in something. There we go. I'm going to have to jerry rig this a little bit because this one doesn't start right away. It would be something like if I were to turn this on, oops. Pay no attention to
But this
what
is a
I'm doing
video.
here.
This is a video. So I'm talking about it's already published. Closed captioning was not turned on. And people are walking through this SCORM package
Where the text is.
in the
Yep.
learner view.
Yeah, so they don't actually have to do that. So right before the, say right now, this course, I picked a bad example, but this course has an enter button. Right now, this is disabled because it's not starting yet. But if it had an enter button, you would have the option to activate, and it would only be visible for screen readers, in which case I come to the page, I can access this course fine, I can read it, I can hear it, whatever is going on in the course, I don't have a problem with. But if I'm coming through the screen reader, you may not want to present that whole e-learning course. You may just want to give them an option to just have their screen reader read the text on the page, in which case we can present to them. Again, it wouldn't be presented to anyone who wasn't using a screen reader, but for screen readers, they would be able to click on that button and it would open up and the screen reader start reading the content for them. And then once it's finished reading it, then they have the option to say, I have read this now and I understand it. So it sort of becomes an attestation alternative. But it means that if you don't have time to go back and revisit all of your courses and make them accessible, which can be a ton of work for, especially for e-learning courses that are really involved, just copying and pasting that content out into this option right here with the, I mean, it has limited formatting. I don't think you really need the formatting, but if you have headers and such, you can incorporate those. So all of that is here.
Where does the content from a SCORM package come from?
You'd have to copy and paste it out of the content because I mean, the LMS doesn't know really what's in the course or how that content needs to be presented. It is just opening it up and it does whatever you've said to do, right? So if you have,
but we don't have that content transcript necessarily.
Right, but taking that content, so opening up the course and copying and pasting that content out into here, we found to be a lot less time consuming than maybe going back to the course and republishing it with all of the accessible bells and whistles turned on, depending on which tool you're using to ensure that it's accessible. So this is really just a quick and dirty
option
re-envisioning. Yeah. Until
so
you have
I'll have to have that. I mean, I don't want to take up our time, but I'll have to have that conversation with you. You would have to go into the course, and where do you get the content? It's being read to you by a narrator, and then there's something on the screen. Where are you getting that from?
Well, we can't get that because we are not
screen
scraping each of the courses. So it would be whoever authored the course would be opening up the course either in the authoring tool, or if they don't have the raw version, then it would be like demoing the course and trying to capture what the content was.
Right. Well,
yeah.
if they have the raw course, then they would go in and republish it with the closed captioning on it. That would,
ideally.
That would solve the problem. So that's the problem. We don't all have the raw course. Some of these were older.
Yeah, so if you don't have the raw version of the course, then what you need to do is, this is a workaround.
Well, it's only a workaround if you have the raw course, I guess. That's what I'm
No, if you can open up the course and you can copy and paste the content out of the course, you can do that. Okay. But yeah, if you don't have that, then it can get kind of tough if you don't have the ability to do that, or if it's an old Flash course. We won't even talk about the old Flash courses, but if you can ideally copy and paste it out.
Got it.
That's your ideal option. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And there are a number of different options of things to do within this area, including some advanced options for overriding this. But the the thing that I think I'm really trying to push here is that we try to go for some consistency from a layout and a branding perspective, make it easier for everyone to support each other and for us to support you. I think would be great. It also means that we can do all of the testing of the branding, testing of the accessibility and everything in one place, and then release it to everyone at once. So when you do that, you can set up, and I would take your root domain, I would apply this brand to the root domain, and then we can work through each of the domains to inherit, but yet customize. And when we're talking about that, we're saying that the options that we showed in the page layout or the options that we showed in the content layout for the colors and such, those are the sorts of things that you would be overriding. Okay, so you're going to inherit all of the hard work of doing your accessibility review and things like that, but yet being able to customize it so it matches your brand. Okay.
Thank you so much. Does
No
anybody
problem.
have any questions for Isobel? I know we're going to be having to take a break here before Abdul comes back. So does anybody have questions?
Was about we had spoken earlier before you started about accessibility, so we brought it up. So I don't mind obviously being the first regional center to go through that, at least in the current domain. I sent you a mock-up of what the website team is thinking or recommending with regards to accessibility. So
Awesome. I'll take a look at that. I'll try to download
You
that
were
now.
going to also show us how to put a video on the login.
Yes.
Page. That'd be awesome.
So media comes up a lot when you're building content pages, because there are two types of, well, it's not really two types of pages anymore. There are system pages, but any page that you create in your admin view, let me close out of here and go into pages. Any page that you're going into in the admin view, you have the ability to add content above whatever the activity list or whatever the system page content is presenting, whether it's my agenda or transcripts and such. You have the ability to add content above it. And that content, we have an editor now that allows you to do some basic formatting, but sometimes you need to go a bit beyond that. And you might want to include a video and you want to make sure that it's responsive, or you might want to do a treatment like this where you're showing a thumbnail and some text below it and then sending them off somewhere. For that, I included specifically a media section. And I did this because primarily we have videos. And when you're presenting a video, you need to make sure that that video works responsively. So it's not just giant and fits on the page when you're looking at it from a desktop device. But if you're looking at it on a tablet or a phone, you need to resize it so that it still fits in that view. So what I've done is I've included what that text, what that HTML needs to look like. And what you're looking at here is this source is really the thing that you need to play. Okay, so once you have a media file uploaded, so let's go to the media section. And I'm going to look for a video. We have no video. Okay, let's pretend that this image is a video. No images either. Okay. Root domain's gotta have something. If not, you would go into add media, you would upload your media file, and then once you have it, when you click on the summary information, it gives you the URL. So you just copy this URL, you go back into your HTML, and you would place that URL into this spot for the source of the video. Okay, you can retitle it to anything you want. The default one, obviously YouTube player, but that's probably not what you want to call it. It might be, 2022 Summit video presentation or something like that. So you can title it from an accessibility perspective. That is important. And then you copy what you have here, and you can either place it into the content on the page by just going on the three dots on the right. So you're flipping over to the content tab, switching in the editor to more, and then you're looking at the code view, which is the two angular brackets, clicking on that, pasting it. Oops, not the thing, but this. switching back out to verify that it's on the page, and then apply. And then what it's going to do is, depending on how you've contained it, it's going to appear on the page, but it will always maintain its aspect ratio for either the 16:9 or the 4:3. Okay, the 16:9 being the widescreen, the 4:3 being more like an old school TV. Okay,
Can you do this on the
on the login page?
login page?
Sure. So for the login page, you instead come into the experience and you go into the branding area. Switch into the login page. And then I would put it in here in the content on the page. In which case I can just, oh, I can't paste it because we are limited on this page right now. Let's see, I've already got a lot of content on here, so I'm gonna cheat. You don't see me doing this, just from an example perspective. Then I can come in and I can paste my content. Okay, so the login page by default allows you to put HTML in there, so you can format whatever you want to do, for which case definitely take a look at the content samples for how to format that content. And then once you have what it is you're trying to add, just make sure you put the entire embed resource in here too.
Can you apply this and show us what it looks like?
Sure. This might look kind of funky, but let's see. There we go.
Awesome.
Yeah. And there are other, the more familiar you get with YouTube, if you want to incorporate videos from YouTube, they give you more options about whether or not to allow full screen and things like that. But otherwise it will just start playing in here. Okay. And you can go full screen or escape out of that if you need to as well. Okay.
Awesome.
So this will work on this page or any content page you want within the LMS. And just make sure that you test it out first to determine which ratio it is. If it's unclear, if it looks close to the square, you're looking at a 3:4. Otherwise, if it's more cinematic or widescreen, you're looking at 16:9. Okay.
Thank you.
If you select the wrong one, I think it adds the borders around it. Okay. And yeah, and this will work on any device. It's set to work on on a phone, tablet, or desktop. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Any other questions?
Are you gonna remove limitations on the login screen? So we don't have to do that code that you used to?
Which limitations are you talking about?
Like, so there's limitations on the login screen that it doesn't allow you to add additional HTML.
Oh, yes. Someone added a max, and I think it was in there from penetration testing. So I'm going to have to follow up with them on that to see where the max came from. What I did was a total cheat. But yeah, I just removed the max length on the input box. But yeah, I'll double check with them to find out where that requirement came from.
Any other questions?
Someone was asking if you can hire or contract out someone to work on the branding for your domains. You absolutely can. The skill sets that you would need primarily, either if you want them to be designing the visuals for it, then the design background. But if you're really just asking them to apply some customizations to it, then the skill sets you would need would be primarily CSS and perhaps a little bit of JavaScript. But primarily CSS is the sort of skill set that you're looking for. If you have anyone who's designing websites and producing websites or has experience working with customizing blog layouts like on WordPress and that, then they probably have the necessary skills, and we can bring them up to speed on this. What they'll really care about, if you're looking at a professional to come in and take on that role, they'll probably be pretty active in the advanced section. Just seeing if there are any other questions that came up.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much.
No problem. If anybody has any specific requests for changes, like I just need to change this one little to CSS or whatever, maybe we can collect all of those up and maybe do a session where I just walk through all of those at some time. I'm happy to do that too if you like.
Thank you so much.
No problem.